Hello and welcome to SciJoy. Today we're going to do another art assignment. It's called Under the Influence. For this art assignment, we were supposed to look at some artists in our life, and we were trying to look at their styles so we could emulate something in their design. And for me, I wanted to interview one of our students that was on our robotics team. And you might be thinking, why is an artist on a robotics team? And it wasn't to make our robot look prettier or more aesthetic like a Steve Jobs kind of purpose. It was to get our message across. And to me, when you add art into science, technology, engineering, and math, and you make STEAM, that's the real purpose, is to get the message of science and engineering across and out to more people, and make it more relatable and more understandable. Both artists, scientists, and engineers are all exploring our world. We're just communicating in a different medium. Scientists and engineers usually use math, which is more of a rigid language and harder to understand, and artists are able to communicate and relate with people a lot better. Just think about the Curiosity landing. If I had talked to you about that in velocity vectors and coefficients of frictions, you wouldn't have thought it was as amazing and such a feat as it was. But if you watch the 7 minutes of terror video, you get it. You understand how complex and how incredible this feat was. We had a discussion with one of our former students, Amanda Lucas. We had a Google Hangout and we took some of the excerpts out of that of us discussing the importance of science, engineering, math, and art all integrating together. Amanda also taught Tim and I about animation, and at the very end of the video you see me and a friend of mine trying to do some art in the style of Amanda. How do you think art integrates with science, technology, engineering, and math? Please let us know in the comments below.
I'm Tim Surge. I'm just one of the idea people here.
Hello! As I said, my name is Amanda Lucas. I'm a guest artist here on SciJoy, and I'm studying animation in school right now, but I also do painting, drawing, illustration, photography, and video. Before I joined robotics, I did art on the side, which consisted of doodling in a sketchbook and not really having any idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. But being on the robotics team gave me the opportunity to apply the skills that I had learned in a way that would be useful in the world around me, and they wouldn't just sit in a sketchbook on my bookshelf doing nothing. I worked with a group of students to help create the first book in a series that was like a children's book for our team. It consisted of the logo for our team, which was a bee, a robotic bee, named Sting, and we made a little story about him that taught kids about construction and shape strength. So that book was called Sting the Robo Bee Shaping Up. And the team we've been talking about this whole time is under the organization of FIRST, and they're an FRC team, and they're FRC Team 836, the Robo-Bees. As for my style, I grew up taking in a lot of animation, especially stuff from Disney and DreamWorks. If you've heard of Glenn Keane, he's a very famous animator who worked for Disney. He worked on he created Ariel's character design. He worked on Aladdin. He worked on Tarzan and helped create the character for that. He was one of the big influences on the way that I draw, as far as drawing figures and their proportions, and they're characterized by, I guess, like really soft hands, very much anatomical, not very cartoony. First thing you do in animation, if you have dialogue in your scene, you have the clip laid out so that you know exactly where the frames are and you can see the waveform, and then you have an annotation column probably. You go and you write out where each syllable begins. So this is I play this, and then there's a pause, planet, etc., etc. You just go and you do the whole thing so that you have it all timed out for when a character is supposed to hit certain poses.
I claim this planet in the name of Mars. Isn't that lovely?
24 frames per second is kind of an old film-based standard.
Mm-hmm.
Now everything on the internet is in high speed. How are you going to handle this
Well,
when we talk about 1500 frames per second?
Yeah, I know
1500.
a lot of
I'll
animation
give you a
now
year.
is like 48, even 60 frames a second for some things, which is ridiculous. Um, but the way that animation is happening is changing a lot. The way I'm learning it, the way that you learn it first is the traditional way of drawing each frame out by hand. Nowadays, even if you're doing 2D, you don't do that. You don't sit and draw each frame out by hand. So it's important to have known that process in order to animate correctly. Um, Oftentimes you'll have like you'll set your character up in the first pose because you're probably going to have a puppet of some sort. Then you set them up in the next pose, and then maybe you'll have a pose in between that, and then the computer will animate it through for you. So there's a lot that way you don't have to worry about frame rate as much and doing every tiny thing. But at the same time, there are new challenges with that as well. The computer may try and animate it for you, but then maybe the character, like if you're having him go like this and then go like this, maybe instead of the arm swinging forward nicely, it goes back, and you have to go through and counter animate and fight that. So, and 3D animation is what Pixar does, where you use computer software to create digital, like puppets, you could say, or marionettes that you click and drag around, and by using a lot of different graphing and other computer softwares, you create animation and have light that is rendered and different effects that are put in, like water, rain, snow, fabric, hair. All those take very special softwares in order to create the different effects and are not animated the same way that you would do for 2D. But whether or not people are learning 2D animation or 3D animation, they always have to go through both ends. Like, it used to be that if you wanted to do 3D, you have to learn 2D first, and then you could do 3D. But now, even if you want to do 2D animation, you have to learn the 3D aspect, because it's even people who are doing 2D animation aren't doing it on paper anymore. It's more Cintiqs are being used, and I don't think you'll find a company today that does not rely on some sort of computer software to create final products. And in the movie industry, specifically, only almost exclusively 3D films are being produced, at least in the West. So those, I think, are not only skills critical to animators and artists, but I think no matter who you are, it's important to be well versed in doing things by hand, as well as learning how to do them on the computer, just with how integrated, with how technology has become so integrated in our society today.
And Tim, I don't know if you did this too, but when I took like the computer drafting classes, the first like 60% of our course before we got to go on the computer was drawing things like 2D objects and trying to make them look 3D on paper, on drafting paper, the way that they used to do.
But yeah, I did have to do everything by hand, and it's one of the best ways I think to get that experience, because when you do use a 3D program, you don't necessarily understand how you can show a three-dimensional object in a two-dimensional space when you have three-dimensional features that are not on the the most immediate face that you're looking at. So a hidden feature or something like that. And that's really good also, because then you have that skill set to look back at, not prehistoric drawing, but anything earlier than at least the 70s.
People talk about art and science or math or engineering or STEM as being almost like two completely different things, but you'll find that they're a lot more interconnected than people give it credit for. And I think one of the biggest bridges between art and STEM is design. If you give art a purpose in the real world and have a function for it, that's where it translates from being just art to being design and being used for something. And that requires both having the artistic side and the engineering side in order to create something. I learned in my Foundations of Technology class that there was a certain process for solving a problem in the engineering world that consisted of steps like identifying the problem, doing research, narrowing down your options, etc. The cool part about art is the process is almost identical to that, except you go about it in a slightly different way. So step 1 is identify the problem. Step 2 is research and development or creating concept. And step 3 is create your prelim drawing and show it, get feedback from it. Step 4 would be to begin your final drawing. You may have a step between this where you go back to the prelim stage or the concept stage and do more concept and show them more prelims depending on if they want a different idea or if they change their minds, which hopefully they won't do. But eventually you're going to come to the final stage.
I said, I quoted you. I said, we're doing a weird art project. He said, ooh. Can I just say?
What do you bake art at? That's neat.